I think we may be at something close to peak Bitcoin. I think it's good if he doesn't buy for a while. Look,
Yeah.
if prices rip, if we get back up to 100K, you might see MicroStrategy trade to a premium. If you think Bitcoin is going back to 100, Stretch probably trades there. It probably trades at something like Bitcoin's price divided by whatever, 1,000 or something. It'll be fine. They seem committed to it. The biggest risk with Stretch is that they would turn their back on it and not pay the dividend.
Can't do that.
But they're not going to do that, at least not in the foreseeable future. So I think it'll trade 80s to mid 90s.
One company just sold $216 million in Bitcoin. So why is Michael Saylor more confident than ever? Let's start with the big picture. Strategy founder Michael Saylor predicts that by 2036, Bitcoin will be far more widespread and deeply woven into the global financial system. He sees it becoming a reserve asset for retail investors, corporations, banks, funds, and even sovereign states. So why did his own company just sell $216 million worth of Bitcoin? Strategy sold 3,588 BTC last week. The breakdown, 1,363 BTC sold for $80.8 million between June 29th and June 30th. Then 2,225 BTC sold for $135.2 million between July 1st and July 5th. That drops their total holdings to 843,775 BTC, still worth around $52.3 billion. Big number. But here's why it might not be a red flag. Matt Hougan, Chief Investment Officer at Bitwise Asset Management, says if Bitcoin climbs back to $100,000, Strategy's preferred shares, nicknamed Strife, should perform well right alongside it. He believes the company stays committed to supporting these shares. The real risk isn't the sale. It's if they stop paying the dividend. Hougan goes further. He thinks Strategy may be approaching the end of its aggressive buying phase and calls that healthy. One company owning 2 million Bitcoin isn't good for the network. Wider distribution means stronger decentralization long-term. There's more. Arrowless forecasts a strong Bitcoin recovery through Q4 2026, targeting $100,000. The rebound starts in October, breaking the current downtrend. By November, Bitcoin could rally past $85,000, confirming a fresh bull market. History backs this pattern. Back in Q4 2022, MicroStrategy sold about 704 Bitcoins too, and it never marked a real exit from their strategy. We're building something real here. Subscribe now, and let's hit 1,000 together.
When the full Stretch freakout happened, right? When it traded to 74 and when MicroStrategy stock was getting crushed, Bitcoin didn't care. It traded flat. And that was one of the first times I had ever seen where Bitcoin didn't care what was happening to Stretch and MicroStrategy. And then, as you said, when he sold Bitcoin to raise cash to sort of push off any concern about strategy into the future, Bitcoin rallied. I think that tells you something pretty specific, which is that strategy was the big dog. It was the tail wagging the dog of the past few years of crypto. It was the biggest buyer. It was also arguably the biggest risk if it ever had to liquidate things. And now it's just become less important. The more it's in the rear view mirror and not front of stage, I think the happier the market is. But it was really interesting to see it rally when he sold. And I think that tells you everything about what people expect from strategy in the future. I think what the market was worried about was that he was going to be an irrational actor, that he was going to be a toddler that stands in the corner and slams his fist and maybe issues Streak at a discount or pushes it to infinity. And it was only if he was an irrational actor that strategy would get into the point where it might be forced to sell a lot of Bitcoin. I think what we learned is that he's a rational actor, which those of us who know Saylor know very well, right? Big, strong voice publicly, but behind the scenes, obviously a very smart operator. And the market realized that and it recovered. So I think it discounted the likelihood of strategy doing something stupid almost to zero, and that's why it rallied. In terms of the net buyer, it's absolutely true that I don't think it will continue to accumulate Bitcoin at the rate it has in the past. We may have even hit peak strategy Bitcoin. I doubt that, but it's of course possible. But it's no longer the person driving this forward. The question is who it becomes. I think the answer there is obvious. It's institutional investors. But maybe more important is for people to reflect on the fact that we've seen this sort of baton transfer before, right? Before strategy, it was GBTC. Before GBTC, it was US retail investors. Before US retail investors, it was Asian retail investors. Before that, it was cypherpunks. There have been like a series of leading buyers. We're now at the end boss of that series, which is institutional capital. And I actually think they're going to take it and run with it. So I feel pretty good about where we are. But yeah, for sure, MicroStrategy is not going to be the big buyer for the next 5 years of Bitcoin. Talking back about strategy and stretch, one signal you're getting to the end of that cycle is when excess leverage and financial engineering gets squeezed out of the system, right? You can think about GBTC trading from a premium to a discount in the 2021, 2022 cycle. You can think about BlockFi and Celsius breaking as an example of financial engineering sort of breaking down. And you saw a little bit of that in late June with strategy trading below an MNAV of 1, with stretch trading to 75. That was sort of like a distressed signal that all the excess greed was transformed into fear. That's the kind of thing that points to a bottom. Although it's worth noting, it doesn't always happen immediately, right? GBTC traded to a discount, I think, in relatively early 2021. It took a while to get to the end of that train. I think we're closer than that this time. But I do think it's a signal we're at a late stage of the bear market. And if we can get new demand from these institutions, I think we'll see the bull market emerge, before the end of the year.
Bitcoin's 4-year cycle just lost its most important believer. For years, traders lived by Bitcoin's 4-year halving cycle. Now, strategy founder Michael Saylor says that pattern is losing its significance. The real driver of Bitcoin's next move isn't the halving anymore. It's institutional capital flows. Saylor points to a pattern that keeps repeating. Bitcoin has always shifted from one dominant buyer group to the next. It started with cypherpunks, then Asian retail investors, then US retail investors. After that came the Grayscale Investments Bitcoin Trust, known as GBTC, and more recently, strategy itself became the dominant force behind demand. Now Matt Hougan, Chief Investment Officer at Bitwise Asset Management, believes the next chapter belongs to institutional capital. He remains optimistic about Bitcoin's long-term outlook. Hougan is careful not to overpromise. Current signals don't guarantee an immediate market bottom, but he believes they point to a bear market in its later stages, closer to ending than beginning. Here's the key takeaway. If institutional investors step in with fresh demand, Hougan expects the next Bitcoin bull market to emerge before the end of the year. That's not far off, which means the setup for the next leg up may already be forming right now. One era ends, another begins. Institutions might write the next chapter. Let's get back to the interview.
I think you made a good point. It was like selling 32 Bitcoin. That felt weird, right? Paying off the 2030 convertible, that felt weird. So I do think people uprated the probability of him acting in a rational or like messianic Bitcoiner direction. But yeah, I think we may be at something close to peak Bitcoin. I think it's good if he doesn't buy for a while. Look, if prices rip, if we get back up to 100K, you might see MicroStrategy trade to a premium. You might see Stretch trade back up towards 100, and then maybe he'll buy more. But it's not going to be at the quantum that he's been buying for the past few years. Nor do we want that. We don't want strategy owning 2 million Bitcoin. That would be bad for Bitcoin as well. So I think it's sort of all working out for the best. If you think Bitcoin is going back to 100, Stretch probably trades there. It probably trades at something like Bitcoin's price divided by whatever, 1,000 or something. It'll be fine. They seem committed to it. The biggest risk with Stretch is that they would turn their back on it and not pay the dividend.
Can't do that.
But they're not going to do that, at least not in the foreseeable future. So I think it'll trade 80s to mid 90s. And then if we ramp, if he's back in the green, if he has profits on his book, if the size of it looks small relative to his Bitcoin stack, you could get it trading back, close to 100 in that scenario. Look, you still have uncertainty in the market, right? You still have the Clarity Act uncertainty, which is a big sword of Damocles hanging over crypto. You still have financial advisors and institutions who I think are the next primary buyer, basically take most of the summer off. So they're unlikely to show up with, $20 billion of Bitcoin, particularly ahead of the Clarity Act. And you have Iran, you have figuring out who Kevin Warsh is and how he views the market. You just have a lot of uncertainty. So my base case, and I could very well be wrong, is it's a choppy summer. I think as we get into the historically good months of crypto, which start in October and accelerate through November, there's a lot of reason to imagine we might be on the other side of that. That we might have the Clarity Act uncertainty behind us. That we might have figured out Kevin Warsh. That we might have squeezed the last bit of leverage out of the system. That this DeFi renaissance might be actually in full bloom. That the stablecoin rules, which are being finalized right now, will start to go into effect. There's a lot of things lining up for the fourth quarter in particular, maybe the late part of the third quarter. I would love to say we go straight up from here. Maybe we do. We've shown a lot of resilience. But I personally think the market's going to want to churn through that uncertainty for a little while. And then I think it'll be a great end of the year. I do think the next cycle, you can see what it is. It's institutional adoption of crypto. It's everyone building their own chain. It's DeFi conquering all assets. It's all assets moving into the crypto and blockchain ecosystem and everything that means for the growth of this ecosystem. I think it's a really good narrative for that next cycle. But I think we have to get probably through a little bit of uncertainty over the summer before we get there. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but that's my base case.
Bitcoin continues to show strong long-term potential, even when short-term uncertainty creates fear across the market. Every market cycle brings challenges, but it also creates new opportunities for patient investors. As Bitcoin attracts more institutional interest and adoption keeps expanding, the next major move could be driven by stronger demand than ever before. For investors, staying informed, focusing on the bigger picture, and avoiding emotional decisions may prove more valuable than trying to predict every short-term price swing. Do you think Bitcoin will reach a new all-time high before the end of this year? Let us know your prediction in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the latest Bitcoin updates. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.